Good morning, everybody. How are we? I have to say it's the first for me. I don't actually have a hangover, which is the first time ever at Edinburgh, but this is what chairing a session does to you. And I'm glad to see you here. A few people obviously got arrested last night because there's a few empty seats. Hope you kept the Scottish police busy. So we're here to discuss true crime, how to crack the USA, and we've got an amazing panel here who I'll introduce in a minute, who represent American broadcasters and then also British broadcasters who make crime programming in America and the rest of the world. So it's very exciting. I think it's no secret that crime is having a massive boom as a genre of television, which is very exciting for us all, particularly in America. There are new channels just purely dedicated to crime. Oxygen used to be a channel that was aimed at women. It is now wall-to-wall crime. Discovery ID is now one of the top 5 network channels for women. So crime is in the ascendance and the audience can't get enough of it, which is great because that means there's a massive market for all of you. So we're going to try and help you work out how you do that and how you get to work with these great people and what we can learn from it. And interestingly, it's not just on the traditional broad networks and things. Netflix has also had a massive impact in crime programming. Making of a Murderer was watched by, reportedly, because of course Netflix never tell us, 7.8 million people watched the final of Making a Murderer, and 10 days after the show dropped, 1 in 5 American adults had watched some of that series. It's an incredible impact and an insatiable. So what we want to do is ask why it's gone so crazy. So before we start talking and before we introduce everybody, let's just have a quick look at some of the great content that's out there.
You walk into these scenes and people are looking at you for help.
That's a pretty bad cut.
The best way that you can do that is pretty much walk in there with your head held high and say, I'm a paramedic and I'm here to help you today.
A massive hunt gets underway for the missing photographer.
Former detective Tony Blockley is walking the route Nathan supposedly took on the night he died.
They began to be tied up, first with ropes and then using chains and padlocks.
I want to be the richest black man in the world, and that got me started on the wrong track.
My mother told me, if you're going to be a mobster, be the best.
This is Live PD.
You're like this, you're all over the place.
You just saw me do a backflip.
That is actually unusual behavior.
I forgot to say, I'm Celia Taylor, by the way. I'm the managing director of Mentorn, and this is my work. I always get so nervous about introducing everybody because I sometimes get it wrong, so I hopefully won't. So starting at the end, this is Sara Kozak, or also known as Koz by everybody. She is the Group Senior Vice President. Vice obviously being a very important word for this session. And as she was telling us last night that she makes hooch in her spare time. Vice is a very appropriate title.
Gin, everybody makes gin, right?
Not
Who
everybody.
doesn't make gin these days?
Not everybody. So no other vices in the other people's titles unless you've just got a secret stash of marijuana in your back garden, but well, that's for another time. And it says you are Group Senior Vice President for ID and American Heroes Channel. You've been absolutely critical to the success of all those channels. As I said, it's a top 5 network. You're just about to have your 10-year-old anniversary, which is very exciting. Yep. And you basically commission about 650 hours of content.
Huge amount.
Huge amount, which is happy days for everybody. So
lots of opportunities.
Lots of opportunities, and we'll talk about that. Next we have Nick Godwin, who's the creative director and co-founder of a production company called Britespark. You are an award-winning director and executive producer. Long, illustrious career, but for this, so you've also made Handsome Devils, Did He Do It, and Manchester's Serial Killer for Channel 4, so really experienced. Next we have Brad Falkman, who's the Senior Director for Non-Fiction and Alternative Programming at A&E. Love the American titles, they're so long. And you've had great success in reinventing crime on the channel with 60 Days In, Intervention, Undercover High, Live PD, and lots of... So you have a slightly different take on crime and what the audience are after at the minute. And then lastly, but not leastly, Ian Russell. He's head of international at ITN, leading producer for content for America and the rest of the world. Major recent series was Drug Lords for Netflix, which I think is their highest rating Anyway, it was a massive hit. It was a massive hit for Netflix. And Killer Instinct with Chris Hansen for ID. So these are producers who've worked for both of these commissioners, so we should get a really sort of rounded view of how it all works. And please, there's an app for your questions. Please send them in, and we'll make room for that at the end. But also, if you just want to ask from the floor, then that's fine too. So quickly, just like, why do we love crime so much? What's it all about, Carl? Can I start off with you?
You know, because we love storytelling. It's just a natural part of the human instinct to engage in a story when you... and we've done it since we were small children. Our parents were reading us stories, especially at night in bed, when it's a little bit scary and you're pulling up the blanket like that, and you know that the boogeyman is out there, but you're safe. And it's exactly the same thing when you're watching, I think, a crime show about heinous crime, about terrible murder, is that you're watching it from the safety of your home, and you know that you're in a safe and a good place. At the same time, I think, because our shows are very relatable, they're often about, of course, interpersonal relationships. You know, a husband killing a wife because he doesn't want to divorce her, or a wife doing something, you know, equally terrible to the husband. There's a relatability, and I've got a feeling that sometimes our audience sits there and they look down and they think, oh my God, could he do that to me? You know, things are a bit rocky right now.
I often think that about my husband. But Brad, is it different? Is the audience in America different, do you think? You know, what is it about that audience in America that loves crime so much?
I think, unfortunately, we have a big pool of crime. I work with a producer currently on a series that he had commissioned originally in the UK, and we did a feasibility study if it could be done in the US. Within 2 months, the volume that he had at his desk was unmatched by anything that he had in the UK. But also for crime, it's just general. It's a part of our storytelling. It's in fiction, it's in nonfiction. It's very relatable. We have shows that you yourself, if you show up in one of our cities on Friday and Saturday night between 9 p.m. and midnight, you can be on our show. If you commit a crime, you can be on our show. But there is that relatability to it, that what if? Or you're driving by and you see an accident on the side of the street. You want to know that story. It's just a natural and organic part of who we are. And in the U.S., I think it's just we have a bigger population and more, you know, we do have a lot more crime. And our incarceration statistics will tell you that is very much true.
Nick, you've been making crime programs for ages. So why the boom? What do you think that's about?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's always, you know, it's always been there. It's just the way it plays out. I mean, crime drama in the UK goes back to the, you know, Z-cars and so on. So, and I think in the UK, there's always been a lot of crime drama around. I think with documentary, it sort of comes and goes, it ebbs and flows more. But in the States too, I mean, it tends to, from sort of sitting from where, you know, where I sit, it comes into fashion with certain channels, then some channels pull back. I mean, I think Discovery main channel used to do quite a lot of crime,
In the early days, they did, yeah.
Barely do any. Nat Geo used to do, you know, a lot of crime. They don't do any anymore. I think what's happened, though, is channels like ID have been very sort of laser sharp in finding a particular audience, a particular kind of storytelling, which has generated a really loyal following, and then other channels like A&E who have sort of backed out for a while, but now have sort of embraced crime again, I think.
I mean, what we also talk about too, in that it's got the ultimate stakes. It's death, it's violence, and that cuts through a saturated market. You know, in the States, we have 100+ broadcasters. On any given night, we have 30 to 40 episodes of premieres, many times season or series finales. So how do you cut through? Well, a good crime story of death and destruction and violence will do it every time.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should just run the next clip, which sort of talks to how the American storytelling does and what's really at its heart. Can we run the next clip?
Don't be afraid. You're not alone. Investigation Discovery, the #1 mystery and suspense network.
I mean, that's a cheeky brand spot, but I mean, you know, I think it gets across exactly that we call them ID addicts, and they are true superfans, and building an audience for superfans and feeding them what they want and being there, being reliable. So, you know, we just do true crime.
And a lot of women, I mean, obviously that felt
60% at least. You know, yeah.
Is that the same on A&E for crime?
Yeah, for the most part it skews female, but it's really also dependent on the format. You know, we look at true crime quite broad, and it depends on many times the cast and how we represent, but for the most part it is a female skew.
So Ian, obviously you're designed to make programming for the American market. How, you know, knowing what you do about the storytelling and the fear, you know, how do you sort of go about doing that? I mean, is it very different from the UK?
I mean, I think you know, sort of coming back to what you were talking about before, the sort of appeal of crime is pretty universal. It's like, you know, when you drive down a motorway and there's a car crash and everyone slows down to sort of see what's happening. It's a sort of, I don't know what the motivation is, it just sort of happens. And is it to see what happens so it doesn't happen to us, or is it just morbid curiosity? I don't know.
I don't know, it really annoys me because it makes massive traffic queues. I wish people would stop doing it.
But and in terms of production, there are similar things and there are different things. I mean, one thing that brought it into focus for me was we did a piece for Oxygen, the crime channel, earlier in the year about the Turpin family. Some of you may have seen it in the press. It was a case with a couple who kept 13 children chained downstairs, and then they were, one of the daughters escaped and they were found, and the couple were arrested. We made that for Oxygen, but we also made a version for Channel 5, which is quite different. So I've got a clip of the US version.
Can we play that clip? It's a bit out of order.
My main thing that I want to know is, where did it turn? What happened? Why?
They began to be tied up, first with ropes and then using chains and padlocks. These punishments would last for weeks or even months at a time.
It's like they were hidden in plain sight. This home is in the middle of a beautiful neighborhood.
Looks like a typical suburban home.
What was allegedly happening?
Who knew that this was going on?
Who would do this?
They are the most notorious parents in America today. Accused of torturing, abusing, and imprisoning 12 of their 13 children.
They began to be tied up, first with ropes and then using chains and padlocks.
It's pretty weird, but I guess evil can be very clever.
These kids were so malnourished. It makes you wonder how long they had to live.
Early on Sunday, January 14th, police in California are called to the home of the reclusive Turpin family and make an horrific discovery. 13 children, most are starving, some are shackled to beds. Their parents, David and Louise Turpin, are arrested. Police escort them from the house. Their story goes global. Within days, they are charged.
Abuse of a dependent adult, false imprisonment, torture, child abuse or neglect, and lewd act on a child by force or fear. If convicted of these charges, these defendants are facing up to 94 years to life in prison.
I mean, we showed those two, they're both pre-titled to get the sense of the difference of storytelling. So
yeah.
How difficult is that for UK broadcasters to get what American networks need in terms of storytelling?
So you know, this one was one that made me think about it, because we did it for a UK broadcast and a US one. I think, you know, in terms of storyline, the main thing was that people were much more familiar with the story in the US than they were in the UK, so the British one was much more expository in terms of kind of like teeing up the story. The US one was very much what we call a why-done-it. Like, everyone knew about the story in the States, but nobody really knew why was it that the couple had kept their kids downstairs. And that was the big thing that we did. We went off and...
Because you're nodding along there to the why done it, as if that's sort of like, you know, terminology.
We do both. I mean, obviously we have lots of who done it, but the why done it, the psychological reasons behind that crime are also incredibly fascinating, make great TV. But one of the things I think is really key in the cold open, you know, teeing up the show, and the big difference between UK and US is that, you know, what we'll do is give you a cold open that really teases what's going to come up and is giving you flashes of the most exciting things that are going to happen and really giving you a sense of what's new and dramatic about the story, and uses lots of keywords that make you immediately engage.
And the music is sort of
and the music
spooky
too, but here, when I'm over in visiting the UK and I'm just watching TV generally, and this speaks to pretty much most factual programming, is that your cold opens before the titles can be anything up to 2 minutes long or longer, and they are a menu of every part of the show. They tell you exactly pretty much what's going to happen, which I think, frankly, gives away so much that by the time you get to the end of it, you can very easily say, yeah, I've seen it. You know, why do I need to stick around for the next hour to...
I mean, that was the thing for us that was a big learning curve, which was that the actual structural thinking is a bit more akin to scripted movies than to traditional British factual. So it's a bit like, oh, what's the monster? Where's the monster? The monster appears late in the programme, and you can sort of allude to him, but you don't really see him until Act 5 or so.
Very often. I mean, we'll have, you know, 5-act structure over the TV hour, which is about 43 minutes of actual content for us. And the first 3 acts can very often be mystery, mystery, mystery. You know, who did this terrible deed? And then you identify by the time you've got to the end of Act 2 or even into Act 3 who it was. And then you've got suspense for the next couple of acts until you nail it at the end. And then we keep the actual narrative going right to the very end. This is something we talk about all the time with producers, is still have one key piece of information going right to the end of the final credits, because we're going seamlessly to the next show. And what I don't want anybody doing is saying, it's over, hold on, I'm going to channel surf and find something else. I want the ID addicts to be going, that's over, and I'm into the next show.
And we have a problem with our channels. We have act breaks, which allow people, and we give them permission to leave. And what we need to do is we need to hold them through. The death of a show is when you get the ratings and it goes like that throughout the hour, because that means people left. We gave them an opportunity to leave. So if I had told you at the beginning that one of you would win $100 if at some point you repeated a word that at the end I asked you what was that word at 10:12, you would be paying attention the entire time. Right now you're on your phones, 2 people left, you know, you would not leave. No.
Not
yes,
really.
yes. You can be on the phone, but that's exactly what we do. We're on our phones. We go to the kitchen, anything. And 60 Days In, we had a long debate at the beginning about subtitles, because our audio in that first series was not that great. And what we discovered, luckily before we aired, that, well, one, we had to, but also we have so many subtitles because you can't stop watching that show. If you go to the kitchen, you are going to miss the entire episode. And what we found was that our audience was so engaged on so many levels that we kept them through there to the hour. So I do completely agree. I'm not sure why, you know, here's exactly what your meal tastes like every part of the way before you even sit down. you know, for me,
I mean, you work with a lot of British broadcasters, and clearly we have a long tradition of incredible documentary making. But what you're talking about isn't quite in that. Do you find British producers are sort of slightly uncomfortable with this sort of almost fiction, or have we kind of got over that sort of preciousness
about? I don't think so, because you know, the content. I mean, for instance, we're here. ID is here in the UK. You can find us on Sky and Virgin, and other, you know, BT or whatever.
Platforms near you.
Exactly. And we're also online, and we're on YouTube. We're everywhere. You can watch ID content. You can get ID content. You can see it. And I think the producers who have the most success have really studied what we do and look back historically, even if just over the last 2-3 years, to see where the big successes have gone. You know, they subscribe to obviously to publications like Real Screen or C21. They follow our press releases. Hey, ID's got a new series out, and then they'll look at the press to see how it did a few days later. There are lots of ways of studying and learning from the successes and thinking, there's a twist on that. And, you know, when you're doing 650 hours a year and you're looking for great original ideas with a unique selling point, you need to know what's worked, what hasn't worked, and how we can twist it just a little bit with this new idea and get it on air.
Nick, have you had a baptism of fire making crime shows for America, or...?
I probably did at first. I mean, before I founded Britespark, I used to work at a company called Cineflix, and we were although I'm a Brit, of course, we're a North American company based in Canada. And the first show I made, I remember, was for actually one of your a network of channels, and it was called Psychic Investigators. And it was, you remember, it was a show about murder investigations where a psychic had helped solve the crime. And I really don't believe in the paranormal, and I just thought, Christ, how on earth are we going to do this? And it had reconstruction and so on, and it would never have flown in the UK on a mainstream channel. And yet, once you sort of really started getting stuck into the storytelling, and that's in a way where I'd sort of learnt the sort of original craft, if you like, of telling stories for an American audience, because actually, you had to tell the investigative story with real logic for it to work, and then you could bring in the slightly absurd psychic who had some vision about water, which helped just you know, in part 4 solve the crime. But I think, it was building from there. But fundamentally, it's all about storytelling, and I think UK crime is absolutely the same. It's about storytelling. It's about telling great stories. It's about what you withhold, about having a sort of internal logic to the storytelling as well, because every audience now thinks they understand how a crime can be is solved. They all have a view on it. You have to assume a certain knowledge on the part of the audience, whether British or American, but within that, the channels are all very different. But actually, I think ID are very different to A&E. You're completely different in...
Yeah, and we'll talk a bit more about that.
I mean, we'd love to be, but we can't take the shows that ID have rejected and take them to A&E. It would be...
Damn and blast.
Totally laughable.
We'd never speak to you again.
I mean, you've both been very successful making programmes for America. I mean, how do you go about it? I mean, you know, obviously we can all send a treatment off to some anonymous, you know, website and it gets processed, which always makes your heart sink. So what's your advice to these people who want to break them out? How do you actually go about doing it? I mean, apart from just sending an email, what else do you need?
I think you just have to sort of dedicate resource, say, as a company, that's what you want to do, and dedicate resource specifically to that. Because, you know, if it's a choice between beginning a US operation and continuing to pitch to the UK, it may be much more comfortable to continue pitching to the people that you know. But I think you just have to make a strategic decision to do it for 2 years and investors.
And what do you need? Do you need an agent? Do you have to have an agent?
No.
Good? No. Yes?
It helps.
Okay, so let's hear from a producer's point of view first, and then we'll come to you about why you don't need an agent, because agents cost money as well. So what's your story?
So the agent...
Does everybody know how the agent system works in America? Maybe you should just give us a little brief.
Are there any US agents here? Okay,
right, we can slag them off then.
Yeah.
What is an agent? Why do you need an agent? Explain.
So, yeah, good question. Question I asked myself when I started on this. Actually, I mean, initially it's kind of about getting access to meetings and things with people that you don't know. So in the early stages, it's incredibly useful. But they, I hate to say it, but they just get quicker responses than you do generally as a producer. So in terms of sort of having dialogue, and also in terms of negotiation as well, you know, if you've got a project that 2 or 3 broadcasters want.
Happy days.
Sometimes happens to us with stuff we do in the UK where rights are available abroad, then we can get the agent to do that negotiation. Because if you do it yourself, then you end up.
And also, if you haven't done it before, you've got somebody that can guide you through the rights and the deals that American.
Yeah,
because it's completely different.
And a sort of, you know, kind of somewhat removed take on what you're doing, you know, the viability of your projects, you know, where to go, all that sort of stuff.
And you can be the lovely creative and they can be the hard-nosed.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
But you both shook your heads when you said you don't need an agent, so give us your...
you know, from my perspective, I would say that at least 80% of the companies that we're working with, including a lot of the British companies, they don't use agents. They obviously have attorneys who are well versed in US media law and really help the process, as Ian said, because with the rights and everything else, you know, it can get tricky. But you know, we work with small boutique companies. We work with companies where the showrunner, you know, the series producer, the principals were literally, you know, producing a show on something with a production company one year, split off because they really feel that they've got the DNA of my network, and they set up their own boutique company. They don't have the big infrastructure, so we arrange a marriage with a bigger production company who've got the infrastructure and can help them along the way, especially with the business side of it. But those creatives have now got their own place to, you know, to make great shows for us. And we've done that several times really, really successfully.
Brad, is that an A&E route to how you work with people?
Well, I think agents do help sometimes get the phone ringing and get us in the door. But I'm also going to blame, I'm not going to blame Sarah, but I'll blame myself and at least those that sit on my side of the business. We don't do enough outreach ourselves. We're a network and a broadcaster.
You're going to have so much outreach after this session.
Yeah. But we don't do enough. We sometimes sit in our throne and just say yes or no. We let the phone ring versus we're making the calls. And, you know, a couple of years ago, when I look at, again, our marketplace and that we have to be, A&E has to be better than everybody else. That's the only way that we get a hit. Our shows have to be better than anyone else, better than our own content as well. We're not going to have the next live PD. We're not going to have the next 60 Days In. We're not going to have the Night Watch. We're going to have the next show that hopefully other people are comparing to. So how do you do that? You go after people. You go after the best producers. So for me, your work speaks louder than anything. Any agent phone call, anything, that's not going to do it. I also talk to a lot of the commissioners in the UK and around the world. Who are you working with? Who excites you? What content excites you? What's there? That's how, at least in the last couple of years, I've been traveling over to the UK quite a bit, and I'm very thankful for a company that allows me to travel 6 hours east instead of 6 hours west.
And presumably, because there is so much demand,
yes,
there's a massive hunger for
every
content.
Producer in the US knows ID. They know exactly what they are. And for me to steal them away from her, I have to go after them. I have to cut them off at the pass. You know?
Fight,
it does,
fight,
yes.
fight.
I mean, she's got 650 hours. I've got 450 plus hours. Well, Live PD alone, 250 hours a year. Yep. 250 hours of live programming a year. We have now 2 spin-offs from it, Police Patrol, which is 100 half hours, PD Cam, which has premiered a couple...
I know, but there's just one indie sucking all the air out of the room.
What do you...
Well, because
no, we need more. We absolutely.
Okay,
I mean, we have
good.
We have incredible holes. Everything that we do needs to be next. I mean, I wonder if you want to play live. I don't know where this is in.
We'll come to it in a minute.
Okay, I'm going to stop.
Okay, good. So in terms of getting these guys' attention, it sounds very easy, but we all know that's what, you know, sizzles. Do you have to have a sizzle, Nick?
No, I mean, I think it's about a dialogue, and whether you know, going back to the agent question, whether the agent gives you the introduction to have a dialogue, or you have a dialogue yourself with the, you know, the teams that work with the American broadcast. It's no different to the UK. I mean, I don't, maybe others do better than us, but we've never had a commission just from a sort of, you know, a top line. It's always out of dialogue that you build to something. And so first you've got to establish a relationship, then you, out of that, you develop a dialogue, and then it's no different to the UK, where most of your ideas get knocked down, and every now and then there's a bit of interest in one, and then you pour resources into that idea, and with any luck and a fair wind, it might get commissioned. But you have to put, as Ian says, the time and the resources in, and you have to have a dialogue with someone who's interested in talking to you. Sending emails, frankly, is on its own is a bit of a waste of time. It's got to be more than that.
We have a robust development team who just take meetings, you know, very often not just pitch meetings. I mean, Real Screen's a good place to come and say hi, you know, introduce myself and my company, and this is what we do, and this is why I want to make crime. You don't necessarily have to come along with a pitch. Making those relationships, getting to know people and getting to know what you know, putting a face to a name is really critical. As soon as you send that log line of a show idea into our portal, you know, that triggers somebody is going to look at it and somebody is going to get back to you. And when our development team see ideas that instantly speak to them, the next thing they'll do is be on the phone and say, let's develop this further, let's talk about it further. I mean, our biggest issue, to be quite honest, is because of the volume and because there are so many producers looking at our space, is that we have on any one day, you know, 5 ideas for exactly the same thing can come in.
I was talking to Corrie at Oxygen, and she basically said, you know, for my advice to producers is send me 13 ideas, because the first 12 we would have already done. Yeah. And she sort of expects that, because she can't expect everybody, particularly British producers, to know the entire back catalogue.
Sure. But I'll tell you, a white-hot idea will separate from itself.
Absolutely.
So you look at our pitches, Cops Live, you look at let's send in regular people to live inside jail for 60 days, and what if you're accused of a crime you absolutely believe you didn't commit? Yeah. All 3 of those, that's the logline for a show, and any commissioner would look at that and go, let's do it, we have to do it. That, I mean, just saying it.
And a great title. A great title. I have a question for you. When you were pitched Live PD, did the producers say it's called Live PD?
No, but we weren't pitched Live PD. This was talking about, this is a conversation between a producer and a network. We very rarely come in with a paint-by-numbers project, or this is exactly the project. It's based on conversation, and it was in US and around the world, is police accountability and transparency, and how can communities showcase that to their audience? Well, you can't hide with live cops. And then we backed into that. So Live PD was a very early on title, absolutely, but how do you do this? And it took a while. It took 3-4 months on air to even figure it out. Yeah. But Live PD, like you said, a good title. You know, I think you know what that show is, Live PD.
Absolutely.
I think you know what Live PD : body cam is. We're very on the nose with sometimes. 60 days in, I think you know what that is. You know, and I think that's important. I think you do it yourself. Those titles are salacious.
Of the cheeky titles. I mean, we cancelled, we had about 4 years of Wives with Knives. And we cancelled it a few years ago, but it's still, whenever any journalist writes about ID, they say, oh, this is the home of Wives with Knives, simply because once you hear it, you can't forget it.
Yeah, it's good. Let's just talk about, obviously, you mostly do sort of shorter runs of things. How many hours of things? What's your, I mean, obviously PD Live is different, but when you're pitching to America, are you trying to, you know, you're not pitching one-offs?
I think it's as long as it needs to be.
Right.
You know, so it can be an hour. We do lots of specials. I mean, we pride ourselves on specials. They can be an hour, 2 hours, a 3-night event, for instance, will often do very well because you can promote it as being special. And then, you know, when it comes to a series, you know, we have 6 is a good number, but we also have runs of 10, and then for a long-running series that's doing our top series at the moment, or have been for some years, would be Homicide Hunter with Lieutenant Joe Kenda, and that's 20 episodes a season. So, you know...
Because Netflix, let's just talk about Netflix, because obviously they've had some massive impact with some of their crime programming, which I'm sure must slightly annoy you when you spend so much time and effort.
Actually, not at all.
It does not annoy me at all.
No.
Good.
Because if you like... this is why, you know, I never worry about competition, either from A&E, Oxygen or Netflix. If you love true crime, and there's lots of it out there, and you've enjoyed watching something on Netflix, your natural reaction, I think, for a lot of people is, where can I get more of it? And then if we can steer you towards, you find out about ID and you find out, I have crime 24/7, well, great, you're going to come to us for that fix. You know?
And I think volume too for us, which is not what Netflix does. Yeah. You know, we do have specials, we have limited series. They've been struggles for us. What hasn't been struggles is placing that call to the producer and say, we're ordering another 20, another 30, another 40 episodes, which I don't think in the UK market that happens. We're going to give you 3, and then we're going to up order to 4. And woohoo, that's exciting. No, we are very much interested in making everybody money, making our audience happy with tons of programming, and that's what all of our shows do.
I know people say in America it's famine to feast, but in America it's sort of, in Britain it's starvation to snack. It's kind of the... Talk about long-form documentary making. I mean, obviously, The Staircase and Making of a Murderer had such a huge impact. I mean, are those the kind of crime documentaries you would invest in? Those things that take a long time to make, or is that just not viable? Are they anomalies? I can't say that word, but you know what I mean.
Well, I think with podcasts and things, there was more interest in sort of active investigation, and some colleagues over there from ITN. Chris Shaw made Interview with the Murderer, which was on Channel 4 and travelled very well all over the world and picked up lots of awards, which was a kind of active look at the Carl Bridgewater case and trying to work out exactly what happened. So, yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting area. I mean, it needs a lot of work, and it's a sort of one that needs, again, lots of investment. But I think in terms of result, it's really interesting.
Because obviously, Making of a Murderer is sort of something that territory you'd already been in, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the Stephen Avery case, I think we'd covered it twice. Once with Nick.
By accident.
Is this Did He Do It?
I know.
But we didn't. We had no idea. Well, in fact, we had no idea until we got a rather nasty letter from the producers about claiming ownership in some shape or form over the story. But at that point, it hadn't gone out on Netflix. But I think those are slight. Both those examples you've given are slight outliers because neither were original Netflix commissions.
No.
I mean, I think they were making of a Murderer for a long time.
Actually, took 10 years of making it. It was two filmmakers.
Was an HBO show, and from way back, probably 10.
And then Sundance. And
So I think, I mean, those shows are extremely hard for a straight production company to do, or for a broadcast.
Business model is not ideal on those.
5-6 years, so they are labours of love, I think, to an extent.
I think we've got a clip of the show you did called Did He Do It? Shall we play that?
Just over 2 years after he's released from prison, Stephen Avery is charged with murdering Teresa Halbach. He claims that just like in the Penny Bernson case, the police are setting him up.
It's rare for a man with a shady past like Avery's to have the upper hand. The 18 years he spent in prison for a crime he didn't commit will give him an emotional advantage with any jury.
Though the cops have a mountain of evidence, they fear the defense will argue there's a grand conspiracy against Avery, motivated by his claim for financial compensation. They need a witness to seal his fate. They find him in Avery's 16-year-old nephew, Brendan Dassey.
Well, it's interesting watching that because we've all, I mean, I don't, most of us seen Making of a Murderer. So, you know, is there a shift in how people are telling stories now? Is, you know, are you adjusting? We've talked about the difference between the US and America, but obviously that was quite a traditional presenter-led voiceover story, and obviously Making of a Murderer is much more sort of pure. Mm-hmm. And are you finding that you want to tell stories differently, or you know, is there a change? Are we over the old-fashioned Agatha Christie kind of fiction storytelling, or?
I mean, actually, if you look at Making of a Murderer, it uses a lot of the, you know, it's just in a different form, but it uses a lot of the tropes that you would find on ID. I think. you know, in terms of sort of hooking the audience in. I mean, that show wasn't actually a conventional presenter-led show. What we did there is we had a prosecutor, a former DA in New York, and a defence lawyer argue over cases like Stephen Avery as to whether they're guilty or not. So actually, that was a small reinvention of a form as well. But I think there absolutely has been a shift in, I mean, you may not agree, but I think the storytelling in America slowed down a bit. I mean, there was a point where it used to be so fast, and I think that probably is the influence of Netflix and so on. That or maybe there's just greater confidence that the audience will stay.
There is. Yeah. I mean, I think we have it. We have on any one night when you're watching ID, you'll see a great variety of pace and a lot of different storytelling from very serious and I would say intellectually rigorous documentary to slightly more salacious and with greater use of recreation, which, by the way, we have worked on so hard with our producers over the years to raise the bar on recrees so that they aren't the cheesy recrees that were so prevalent 10 years ago. Now I think the dramatic content is often really, really high.
Really compelling. I've got a siren here that I was going to use if any of you said the word innovation or bold, but I'm actually going to use it on myself now because, if I can make it work. Because basically there is a need for innovation. Obviously Wives of Knives is great, but you can't keep doing that. So do you want to just talk a bit about the innovation? Obviously we've got some clips in a minute. Should we just start with those clips? So we've got Sugartown, which is a new show you've got coming up on ID. Night Watch on A&E, which you can tell us more, but it's just been a massive hit, which is exciting. And then obviously Live PD, because some people might not have seen these shows. So can we run that clip, please? Wow, they look amazing. Fantastic. Sugartown is not out yet.
It's actually going to be on ID here. It's aired in the US and will air here on September the 18th, I think, at 10 o'clock.
Great. And Night Watch has been a huge hit, hasn't it?
Yes, so Night Watch Nation, we started off with Night Watch a few years ago, which was very highly rated, and it profiled at the first series, the New Orleans, EMS, police, and fire. And what we discovered is our audience just loves people in that bus. They love that relationship with those two individuals. You have Ambulance and other series in the UK, but that relationship was so paramount. So what we decided was, let's listen to the audience and give them what they want and take a little bit of that Live PD model, and now we're in 4 different cities. We start with the calls in the 911 center and then follow it through into the field. But it's those characters. That show is all about character and story. And that's our nation, which they have nicknamed themselves. They love our characters. And Live PD, is on the other end. It's just popcorn television. You can't stop watching. I
bet that handsome black cop who arrested the boy doing back, I bet he's very popular on social.
He's very popular.
Yeah.
And all of that happened live. All of that. That was not taped over 4 months or 5 months. That was all live television. So in any moment, at any point, good luck going to the bathroom because you may miss something. Try to not talk to the television. Try not to be on Twitter. It's really, really difficult. It's addicting, and it, subsequently spun off 2 shows. But that's, I think, what we do. We like to think of ourselves as groundbreaking and trailblazing. So when we look at the innovation, we don't like to use the word innovation because we just want different. And this is A&E. Our audience expects something completely different than what others aren't doing. If we don't do that, we don't win. Once we do, and we have that log line and somehow it breaks through with itself, then we have a huge winner on our hand. And Night Watch last week was our highest rated series premiere in almost 2 years. Fingers crossed tonight it continues that trend.
Great. Right, we're going to have some questions then. We've got sort of about 5 minutes left. Anybody on the floor got any questions? Or should I just go? Hello.
Hello. More for the producers. So you're over here. Can you just talk us through what kind of boots on the ground sort of work you need to do to really get that commission if you're in Holborn or West?
Did everybody hear that? The question is, if you're a UK producer, how much boots on the ground do you actually need? Do you need to be in your offices? Will you take meetings by Skype? How, you know, it's all about relationships, but not everybody can afford to fly over to the States.
I'm actually asking about the actual building up for the commission. So in terms of level of access, you know, that's what I'm interested in, because obviously we can all read, we can all get sort of, you know, stuff off the internet, but actually sending AP producers out there, how often do you have to do that, at what stage to get a commission?
Well, we've got an exec and a freelance producer based in Washington, and in the case of the Turpin show, through them we had a local fixer who lived near the town in which Mrs. Turpin's family lived, and we sent him out and got the access by knocking on the door, and that was essentially what got the commission on that one. But I think, you know, sort of logistically and also creatively, it really helps to have some very sort of experienced American TV making DNA within the mix.
Do you look for that? Do you need an American showrunner? Is that something?
You don't, absolutely, but it certainly helps to have somebody who has made a crime show and has made a crime show for the US. But I think, I mean, we work, for instance, with Arrow Media quite a bit on October. October have two of their execs are based in New York. Arrow's team is all in London. I mean, they've got 3 floors of people just making crime shows for us and doing and researching most of the stories from London. I think they're amazing how they find these great stories from their desks in London. But then, if they need unique access, obviously they've got to get on a plane and come out.
But it's just basic stuff. You need American stories. It's very rare that you'll take anything that's not an American story, unless it's a global event, presumably. Is that just basic stuff? It needs to be American
Pretty
crime?
much, although we've had series in the past from UK producers where, you know, they've pitched a series of 10 shows and maybe 2 of them are UK crimes, and we've been good with that.
Okay, quick practical stuff. People want to know, do you co-pro with other channels? And would you co-pro with UK broadcasters? Or is that complicated from a rights position?
No, it's not off the table, but we're lucky, we're doing well. So we have money, and usually, again, if it's a hot idea, there's no price, you know, to it. We're going to do it. So but we're open.
Fully fund, own it, market it, have it as completely your show.
I have a new CEO that, you know, may think out of the box or differently, but at least at this current stage, I don't believe we've ever co-pro'd.
We used to do a lot of it. Then we really got into, we'll commission everything, and we just do a few co-pros, but it's not impossible.
I mean, I want to work with the creator, I want to work with the IP, I want to work with the producers, I want to work with the people on the ground. You know, that's who's making the show. But yeah, I think you do need a certain level of understanding, and there are a tremendous amount of individuals in the UK that know the market in the US. Yeah. I have an entire series, 100% is being posted and prepped inside the UK, yeah. And yes, they're on the ground in the US because there are US stories. I had another format that wasn't crime, 100% of the development, I was Skyped into the UK for development. It comes from anywhere and everywhere. But again, it's the idea, and it's
October Films, they use a disused sort of little air station and up in Norfolk, where they do all their recreations for all their ID shows up there. It's fantastic. So it can all be actually
normal for Norfolk, as they say, truly. No doubt. Any other questions on the floor? No? Well, let's just have a look.
We were so good, we answered all your questions before you asked.
Is there any crime you wouldn't...
Or you're asleep.
Is there any crime you wouldn't feature? I mean, is there something that's just too icky, too... You know, is there a line where the audience just go, oh, that's too much? Is that... Or
I mean, there's never say never, but we have not had success in certain areas of crime. You
like
know,
what?
A lot of this sexual molestation, that side of things.
Rape,
you know,
children.
And children. You know, those are the 2 things that are...
For us...
I don't want to watch that.
For us, you know, organised crime, robberies, heists, street crime, where the, you know, the story doesn't have the necessary kind of twists and turns that we're looking for. Interpersonal relationships are where really, you know, is the golden place to be. But not heists, you know, not the great train robbery.
Great. Any more for any more? No? Yes, one more, quickly.
Just a quick question. How do the legal liabilities work? Do the broadcasters share the liability? Or?
Yeah, because obviously American law is very different to UK law. Do you share the liability on those things, or is it?
You know, it's a complex area. I'll say that, but essentially we make sure everybody's protected.
Yes. What she said.
Well, if we run out of time, I'd just like to say thank you very much to this illustrious panel.
Oh,
one more question, sorry.
Just in terms of crime program, do you see there's more of a move towards having on-screen talent in terms of it could be a detective, a retired detective, which I think a few years ago used to be less of the case.
Yeah, it's a great question, and yes, authentic people who actually have the experience. You know, if you find a great detective, here's the really good thing: is his or her stories, very likely they've never been covered before, because they're their stories. So you've got a terrific USP immediately. You know, we do have some.
But it needs to be their stories. You can't just put them as a presenter onto other people.
That would be very counterintuitive. But if they're their stories, that's why Kenda works. Kenda solved 400 murders in Colorado Springs, and over a long period. But they're all his stories.
Great, we really have run out of time. So thank you very much for our fantastic panel. You know where to find them. And thanks very much to our sponsors, ITN, and have a really great festival. And be careful out there, don't get arrested.